So this past weekend, I spent some time touring some local university campuses as my oldest daughter is about to embark on her post-secondary career. While we're on one of those campuses, I came across a pretty unique business idea, something that had never occurred to me and something that actually intrigued me. A pizza vending machine. That's right, a vending machine that dispersed fully cooked, custom-made pizzas right there on the university campus, open 24/7. A pizza vending machine.
Really?
Having once been a university student, the idea of something that was open 24/7 and servicing a young client base in need of instant gratification or novelty intrigued me. So I actually did a little bit of research, a little bit of digging, and I quickly found out that that pizza vending machine was actually for sale on Facebook Marketplace. So I did what anyone curious would do. I reached out, started asking questions, and what I got actually surprised me. Not so much because of the novelty of the pizza vending machine, but the so-called business behind it.
Look, hey, this is a squeaky clean, highly profitable, at least potentially, local institution.
So the premise was simple. Walk up to a pizza vending machine, insert your form of payment, select your pizza, and 3 minutes later, a hot, delicious pie is delivered to you, ready to consume there on the spot. I'd actually heard of this before, as my daughter in her gallivanting on university campuses early in the year had brought the concept to my attention, and I thought it was ludicrous. But the question wasn't now, was it ludicrous? The question was it profitable, and was it worth purchasing?
I'd buy that for $1.
So the gentleman looking to sell the whole operation was actually pretty forthcoming for numbers. Great salesman, talking about the opportunity, the potential for growth, the social media interaction. Really a pretty sexy little package he had put together, all predicated on buying pizza from a vending machine.
You know what we call this? You know what we call this? Pizza. Oh, that's nice.
But salesmanship is one thing, numbers are entirely another. So let's dig through with what he provided. Well, first and foremost, revenue. He said he'd owned the pizza vending machine for about 4 years, and the last 12 months was his most successful, attributed primarily to the wonderful social media machine he had behind him.
Liar!
So what does success look like to him? Well, he generated a revenue of $40,500 in the last 12 months. At a paltry price of $15 a pizza, that works out to a little over 2,700 pizzas. That's a lot of pizza. So to me, my head starts going, and I start thinking to myself, you know what? We may have something here. But of course, revenue does not dictate profit. What dictates profit is revenue minus expenses. So I started digging in on that. The first expense was rent. Now, it wasn't a flat fee that this individual was paying. He was actually paying the university in which the machine was located on a percentage of sales, specifically 10%. So for every dollar in revenue he got, 10 cents went to the university. That was a deal that was going to be going on in perpetuity, but also meant that as sales increase, so does rent. However, in the last 12 months, simple math will tell you that the rent, 10% of $40,500 equals $4,050. So right away, where are we? Well, we're still profitable, and that's kind of sexy, to the tune of almost a little over $36,000. But rent does not dictate everything. The pizza machine itself was actually a franchise, if you will. It was operated and serviced by a pizza company that built the machine and had an agreement with the owner to supply the pizzas in which they made. So the first thing we had to look at was what's called cost of goods sold. Specifically, how much does it cost to get a pizza from these guys before I throw it in the machine and sell it for $15? Well, $6.50 per pizza, which, at the amount we're talking here, equals a return of $13,450. Basically, the cost to get the pizza, $13,450. That eats into our profit quite a bit. In fact, it takes our profit down to about $23,000. But still, $23,000 in profit annually for a pizza vending machine is absolutely nothing to sneeze at. However, that's not all we're looking at, though, from an expense point of view. As I mentioned, we had a partnership with a company, so not only did you have to buy your pizza from them, but they also wanted, literally, a slice of every pie you sold, and what they called a royalty. What's a royalty? Well, it's a percentage of your sales that goes to that company for processing, marketing, all sorts of wonderful stuff that's generally meaningless, but helps them make a little bit of money. In this case, 5%. So $2,025 disappears out of that revenue to help appease your franchise deal. So all of a sudden, that profit continues to dwindle and dwindle. Now, what about insurance? Well, insurance, of course, is important because we got a bunch of drunken idiots buying pizza in the middle of the night, and something stupid is bound to happen. So we have to make sure that we're protected. And in this case, insurance worked out to about $600 per year. So once we take into account rent, royalty, cost of goods sold, and insurance, our profit is down to about $20,000, roughly half. Good 50% margin, and that's exciting.
Money! Jerry, does that make you feel good just to say that?
I actually was ready to make an offer almost instantly based on the asking price, until I asked one important question. What about the machine itself? Who owns that? And the answer was a lot of humming and hawing. Not a good sign.
Ooh, yeah.
As it turns out, the individual selling this had financed the machine on a lease-to-own basis from the provider. He was into a 6-year lease, at which point he could buy the machine out at the end. And in that 6 years, he had already covered about 4 of them. So that meant we still had to make payments on that machine for the next 2 years, before we even looked at actually owning it. How much are those lease payments, you ask? Well, a very paltry $4,000 plus per month. $4,000 plus per month. Specifically, $52,200 per year. $52,200 per year just for the machine.
Boy, that escalated quickly. I mean, that really got out of hand fast.
And you say to yourself, but wait a minute. We were only making 20 grand after all expenses before the machine. And that's right. Once you throw in the actual cost of the lease itself, we're actually losing about $32,000 a year.
You serious?
How much for this wonderful venture, you ask? Well, the seller was saying, for the privilege of losing $32,000 a year, you only have to give me $35,000.
What?
So simple math is going to tell you $35,000 to buy, and let's just call it 30 and 30 losses in your first 2 years, assuming everything just keeps going peachy keen, you're into 100 grand for a pizza vending machine. I'll let that sink in.
Mistake. I like to announce my mistakes up front.
Go ahead.
So the natural question is, why in the name of sweet Moses would anyone purchase this? Well, the answer is nobody would, or at least nobody should. This guy had been trying to sell this thing for a little while, initially asking a price of 70 grand, and now he was willing to go to 35, or best offer.
You know how much I sacrificed?
Simple math is going to tell you this. It would take a period of 6, 7, or even more years for you to actually break even before you actually start putting actual profit into your pocket. 6 to 8 years. That's a lifetime.
Jeez, man, it'll work. Give it a chance.
This is what's called a disaster business. This is actually not even a business. So how does the owner justify his $35,000 price? Well, social media, my friends. This guy had the genius idea, and it actually was pretty smart, of installing a door cam, a ring, on his actual pizza machine, allowing drunken kids to push the button, make social media content while waiting for their pizza, at which point he would then put it online under the guise of a contest of a free pizza for the best social media content of the week. Sounds really exciting. Except this, while claiming to have all kinds of views and growth rates in the hundreds of percent every week, ultimately, this guy has about 800 followers.
Oh, come on!
800 followers. It would actually be cheaper if I went out and paid those people to buy pizza from me than to actually pay for the social media account that was allegedly bringing them in to do so. It was a ludicrous proposition. $35,000 for a business losing 30 grand a year with 800 social media followers. That said, the guy was a heck of a salesman. Sold it hard, sold it really well, but just didn't back the numbers up.
So, do you want to take a leap of faith? Or become an old man, filled with regret, waiting to die alone?
So back to where I started, which is touring university campuses, seeing a pizza vending machine, and ultimately walking away from it. This is the challenge when you actually start buying small local businesses. The individuals who own them put unrealistic valuations on them because they're emotionally attached. They believe that all the work they've done is worth something and that you should pay them for everything that they've built. In this case, the reality is nothing had been built. A pizza vending machine was placed on a university campus, and while a boat ton of pizzas were sold, every single one of them was sold at a loss. I could do that. I don't need to spend a whole bunch of money to lose it. It doesn't make any sense. So we walked away. Amicably, politely, and professionally. I wish the seller the best of luck, but I suspect he's going to be holding on that for some time. The irony of the situation is he wanted to sell the business in the hopes of using those proceeds to purchase additional machines to put into other locations. Just doesn't make sense to me. But then again, what do I know? I'm a 40-something-year-old guy in a midlife crisis who walked away from a six-figure job to buy a laundromat and a few other small businesses. So don't take my word for what makes sense and what doesn't. Take the numbers. You can't fake numbers. Well, unless you're trying to sell me a laundromat. We'll talk about that next time. Like, subscribe, comment, and we'll see you then.